Welcome everybody. We have a short video as people are arriving and some housekeeping there. Welcome everyone. We just have some housekeeping here and a short video for you as people arrive.
Catalyst 2030 started life as a WhatsApp group among social entrepreneurs, connecting to envision real transformational change. Launched at the World Economic Forum in January 2020, it's grown into a global movement accelerating change to ensure the SDGs are reached by 2030. Fueled by passion, our 550 members working in 175 countries have collectively put in an amazing 50,000 volunteer hours, touching the lives of 2 billion people. And we're driven by values, to which we hold ourselves accountable. 2020 was a busy year, co-creating 3 reports with partners and producing one of our own. Inviting high-level guests to participate in the Catalyzing Change campaign, hosting fireside chats and expert hours, which will be continuing in 2021. To celebrate our achievements, together we placed our supporters in the limelight with the first Catalyst 2030 Awards for Systemic Change. With the blessing of the Dalai Lama, we celebrated finalists and winners in the following categories: special recognition for our early supporters, individual philanthropists, donor organizations, philanthropic intermediaries, corporate organizations, bi- and multilateral organizations, and 4 regional winners in the category of national governments. And now on to Catalyzing Change Week 2021. During this social entrepreneur-led event, we bring together diverse stakeholders in over 100 sessions to showcase their systems change efforts and the best practices that can accelerate our work in pursuit of the SDGs.
Welcome everybody. Such an inspiring video. My name is Sue Riddlestone. I'm chair for your session, which is how can social entrepreneurs help the UN to achieve the SDGs? And in this 1-hour session, we're going to have presentations by 2 esteemed panelists who work at the UN of 10 minutes each. And then we're going to have a panel discussion with some pre-submitted talking points, and then opening up to you, the audience, in about 40-45 minutes time to have a wider discussion. And our objective is to look at sharing experiences of successful joint working of the UN and social entrepreneurs, and also, realistically, where are challenges faced. And there is a big potential, which we're going to hear about through the increasing recognition of a new economy, a social and solidarity economy, which Chantal Line and Vic, our speakers, will tell us about. And we want to develop some recommendations on how we can work together more effectively to meet the challenge of achieving the Sustainable Development Goals by 2030. So first of all, just to briefly run through who we are on the panel. So I'm Chief Executive and co-founder of Sustainability Social Enterprise Bioregional. And we have had a very positive experience working with the UN to develop the Sustainable Development Goals, including as the global focal point for sustainable consumption and production. I'm a founding member of the Catalyst 2030 board and a chair of the working group on working with governments and UN advocacy. There's a number of Catalyst 2030 working group 6 members here, all award-winning social entrepreneurs and people who are innovators in the sector who will be contributing to the session. And Laura Walsh, who is group coordinator is here to help. Message Laura if you need anything, or Yasmin from the Secretariat. So I'll introduce our two panelists from the UN. So delighted to have Dr. Chantal Line Carpentier here. She's Chief of the New York office of the United Nations Conference on Trade and Development, which was created 50 years ago at the same time as the group of 77, now 132 developing countries to work towards a fairer and more balanced economic regime. And the UNCTAD is the focal point within the UN for the integrated treatment of trade, finance, investment and technology. So that is the perspective of Chantal Line today. But I just want to add that I first got to know Chantal Line when she was the UN Major Groups Programme Coordinator in New York, where she supported the participation of more than 10,000 non-state actors in Rio +20 and their voice in the negotiations of Sustainable Development Goals. And I was one of those, Bioregional was one of those, so thank you, you did a great job, Chantal Line. We'll hear from Chantal Line in a moment. Vic Van Vuuren is Director of Enterprises Department, International Labour Organization at the UN in Geneva, which promotes decent work by supporting sustainable enterprises and strengthening the institutions and governance systems which nurture enterprises. So we're very grateful to Vic, who is the chair of the United Nations Task Force on the Social and Solidarity Economy. And he has invited Catalyst 2030 to become an observer organisation. And we're keen to support adoption of a UN resolution, which Vic will tell us more about shortly. But first, let's hear from Chantal Line with her perspectives on the topic of how can social entrepreneurs help the UN to achieve the SDGs? What have we got to offer, Chantal Line?
Thank you so much, Sue. And let me start by asking all panelists, do you feel, any one of you feels that the financial and economic system that we have now can actually allow us to achieve the SDGs by 2030? I think that's the first question we need to ask ourselves.
I don't think so.
Okay, I think that's a shared point of view at this point. But when we started our work at the UN Network of Economists at the end of 2020, and I proposed that the UN Network of Economists work on the new economics for sustainable development, one of the first reactions among some of the economists was, well, we can't really go and heads to head with the mainstream economics because then we would, and then since then, it's amazing because of the deep impact of the COVID-19, the largest economic crisis we had since the Great Depression. And there's more and more leaders out there that are calling for a new economics, a new system, financial system to be able to achieve not only the SDGs, but peace on this planet. So basically, after the proposal was accepted by our chief economist, we basically developed, what's important is to realize is that the UN has been reformed since we first met. And now we have in our 133 countries, program country, we have country teams. And in each one of them, as a result of the reform, we have an economist and we have a person in charge of partnership and ensuring that we leave no one behind. And so in this network of economists, we have anywhere between 60 and 80 of them that participate in these calls and this joint work that we're developing on new economics for sustainable development. And so what we propose is to actually look at the green economy, which of course was taught in the first financial crisis in 2007, 2008. But then we also, the reason we got the SDGs is because there was a pushback from member states, especially developing countries, on the green economy. They wanted to stick with the concept of sustainable development because green economy was too restrictive. And indeed, the small island developing states said, well, we don't have a lot of land, but we have a lot of ocean. What about the blue economy? And then a lot of developing countries that depend a lot on the creative economy said, well, what about the orange economy? It's very powerful. And Indonesia has led a resolution for the International Year of Creative Economy. And Colombia and Latin America calls it the orange economy. And then came the idea, and this is in Vic's area, this idea of the purple economy. So this is from a network of feminist economists that said, we keep talking about, you know, this Green New Deal, and this New Deal is basically investment in infrastructure. But investment in infrastructure is construction job, which are men's job. And yet in this crisis, it's the women that are losing their job disproportionately. So why don't we invest in the sectors where the women are? And at the same time, we need massive investment in education, health, and digital. And so why don't we have a call for massive investment in the purple economy? So we've developed briefs on the blue, the green, the orange, the purple, as well as the yellow economy. The yellow economy is the attention economy. So you will have noticed that when you go to a platform such as Amazon or Facebook or TikTok, they do everything, and they have algorithm and machine learning to keep you there as long as possible, so they can earn money by selling it to their marketing companies, right? And so they monetize our attention. What if we were to monetize, instead of monetizing our attention, we use that to affect the behavioral change that we need towards sustainable consumption production, right? So that's the idea of the yellow economy. And then, of course, there are the other areas of circular economy, the methods to get there. Circular economy, social and solidarity economy, and the frugal innovation. And we saw a lot of frugal innovation during this crisis, because in time of scarcity, we basically get people that will find ways. And one of the great example was Decathlon, that basically came up with taking the diving mask and transforming them into respirators, right? And so when we saw a lot of these pivoting, and a lot of them were done by social entrepreneurs, or people that were in this area of social entrepreneurship. And it is clear that women and youth and the small medium enterprises have been heavily hit. And actually those that benefited from the crisis are the billionaires, the large corporation, and therefore there's a duty and for the UN and for the world to actually correct this and invest in MSMEs, invest in social entrepreneurs, and invest in youth and women, especially, that leads those. I'll give you scary statistics. Because not only well, first of all, we up to $7 trillion of stimulus packages right now. Most of it was to support the economy, that was on life support, but there's still several that were in the recovery already, for those that are coming out to their recovery. 1% of this 17 trillion has been invested in the green economy. 1%. And we don't have the data in dollars, but only 18% of the recovery measures are targeted towards women. And yet, what do you hear everywhere? What does everybody say? So whatever our leaders say and what they do is completely disconnected. So we need to address this issue. And in our book, this is the opportunity to emerge with better and more efficient set of policies and address the actually pre-existing condition that prevented social entrepreneurs and micro small enterprises from actually thriving. And so this, and help us, as you said, Sue, to rebuild a more resilient, green, inclusive, connected recovery that actually lift up the most vulnerable groups amongst them. And so let me just go quickly in concluding here. Through the 5 recommendations that we made, UNTAD writes the Entrepreneurship for Sustainable Development report for the General Assembly. And last year, we made 5 recommendations that were needed in the context of COVID-19. The first one, comprehensive and holistic policies. And for this, as you know, we have an entrepreneurship policy framework that was done before the SDGs that we now have adapted. And here, what we're saying is that we need to promote entrepreneurship development that motivate and capacitate entrepreneurs and MSMEs to tackle the underperforming SDGs, such as affordable access to basic services. There's hundreds of millions of people without this. So this is a business opportunity. Under the sustainable consumption production, SDG 12, innovation for sustainable cities, SDG 11, in addition to creating jobs, which is SDG 8, right? And so just to give a background, we did conduct a training with the International Council on Small Business last spring on MSMEs and entrepreneurs on how, if we took this opportunity of the COVID and capacitated our micro, small enterprises and entrepreneurs in actually first raising awareness about the business opportunities related to the SDGs, but then capacitating them to be able to respond and capture these business opportunity. What would happen? We had an unprecedented response rate to this webinar, which is now rolling and rolling and rolling. And as a result, George Washington University has actually changed its curriculum. And what they did is basically right away in the first year of the program on entrepreneurship, which is the largest growing sector in a business school, they basically introduced the student to the SDGs and then asked them to develop their ideas for business around the SDGs. And as a result, the de facto effect is that these graduates come out as de facto social entrepreneurs, but not social entrepreneurship as not-for-profit, social entrepreneur that do well by doing good, because they basically developed the idea to solve the world's problem. And that for me is very exciting, because this is $12 trillion that is left on the table, where SMEs and micro small enterprises and entrepreneurs actually have a competitive advantage to pivot and solve compared to the largest enterprises. Second one, stronger coordination among stakeholders in the ecosystem. We need a strong ecosystem and develop the entrepreneurship mindset and the entrepreneurship ecosystem. And for that, we all need to work together. And if we had time later, I can talk about a project that we're all doing together with the UN on supporting the MSMEs out of this COVID-19. Third, of course, no-brainer, digitalization. It's crucial to help entrepreneurs absorb the shocks and update business model and access to new market and financial scheme through the digital space. Many of them were not ready when the crisis hit. Those that succeeded went online. And yet a lot of our MSMEs and social entrepreneurs were not ready to do that. So we need to invest not only in digital infrastructure, but also in digital literacy, especially financial literacy as well. Fourth, investment in entrepreneurial education and skill training to instill an entrepreneurship mindset. I mentioned that in an example earlier. And fifth, collection of high quality, reliable and comparable data to measure the policy impact. But right now, there's this debate, and there's still some people that believe that if you invest in MSMEs, and it's true that in the past, when you just do a one-off short-term, oh, we need to create jobs, so we're going to put money on social entrepreneurs or on MSMEs, you may not have a long-term impact. But if you have a systemic approach, but we don't know, we haven't quantified this, so we need to do that so we can actually achieve, convince our leaders that this is where they need to invest. So let me finish by saying, this is where we need to invest post-COVID. Social, medium, small enterprise and entrepreneurs, women, and green. Over to you. So.
Fantastic work you're doing there, Chantal Line. Shocked by the only 1% of the stimulus packages going to the green economy. That's terrible. You may be inspired by what Chantal Line said to have some questions that you might want to bring in, that we can bring in. So please do post in the chat any questions you have, and we'll pick up on it later. And thank you very much for that, Chantal Line. So over now to Vic, who's going to tell us a bit more about the social and solidarity economy.
Thank you very much. You know, I want to start with two analogies to try and shape where we are at the moment and where we need to get to. You know, in South Africa, where I was raised, we had going from an apartheid to a post-apartheid era, and I was part of the business leadership, because I worked in the private sector, of determining how we're going to go forward. And it was a no-brainer when we asked all of the leaders in the country, be it government, be it the unions, be it employers, to raise their right hand if they thought that transformation and an affirmative action plan was necessary. Or that had to need to do it. Everyone would raise their right hand and say, we are totally committed to a new South Africa and let's move together. But what we soon realized, without lighting a little fire, nothing happens. So this whole path of good intentions, as they say, the road to heaven is paved with good intentions. You will find today, if you talk to anybody about the social and solidarity economy, they will raise the right hand and say it's got a role to play in alleviating the social deficit, the human suffering and hardship. But very little is being done to build up and scale up. And that's one of the words that you use in Catalyst 2030 is the ability to accelerate. And what we need to realize that to accelerate at a global pace is going to take some very key investments in order to make that happen. Now, we're talking about human beings and not machines that need repairing. And that's what people need to understand, that the name of the game now, which has been exacerbated or made more acute by the pandemic, is a different ball game. And the sooner we realize that and put our forces together, the better. You know, we're not going to achieve the SDGs, as Chantal Line mentioned, at the pace that we're going now. Efforts need to be stepped up. We keep talking about this. We need to address the root causes of exclusionary and unsustainable development. And this is self-evident from the pandemic, which has made it more acute. But there's a growing interest among development practitioners, academics, and policymakers about the social and solidarity economy because of it being people-centered and planet-sensitive. And I think that's where the answer lies. And this has positioned the SSE as a significant element in this transformative change and achieving the SDGs. But Chantal Line touched on, you know, the students that were learning about this, but our students out there don't know about the social economy, about social enterprises. My 4 boys graduated out of school and university and didn't know a thing about social entrepreneurship. And so part of the challenge is the education systems at a national level to create the future social entrepreneurs and not fall in there by accident or because you know someone who pulled you in or because you've perhaps got a little bit more of a value-driven proposition in your mind than others may have. It needs to be something that we roll out much better. There is an interest to fast track this, but we need to see how to do it. Now, at the UN task force, we talk about social enterprise rather than social entrepreneur. And I don't want to get into the debate. There's many definitions of which way we're going. But I do believe that at the UN, we're talking the same language as what Catalyst 2030 and the social entrepreneurs are talking about. And it's the doing good out there and eroding that social deficit is what we're talking about. And you know, I think we need to try and work towards a common definition, which will be helpful. But at this point in time, it's quite clear that we're talking the same business. Now, regarding the contribution of social enterprises to the SDGs, the ILO estimates that 70% of all workers in developing countries are in the informal economy. So we have a huge deficit on this whole decent work component, which is SDG 8. Under the right conditions, social enterprises can offer an avenue in search for sustainable employment and promoting a transition to the formal economy. There's one huge angle and opportunity. Then we move to the SDG 8. We'd like to mention a recent UNTFSSE report, which states that social enterprises can create 600 million jobs over the next 15 years and support sustainable development challenges. Here's the opportunity. And so we've got these pockets of excellence all over, including those on the call today who are creating these pockets. How do we pull this together to create this critical mass? And we haven't got that right yet. The report also refers, the UNTFSSE report refers to the case in Australia, where social enterprises have generated 2 to 3% of GDP and created 200,000 jobs. And the estimate is that they can take that up to 4% of GDP and 500,000 new jobs. But look at the percentages we're talking about, 2%, 4%. It's still very small, but with huge potential. Regarding inclusion, social enterprises have a lot of potential for integrating disadvantaged groups in work, which refers to SDGs 8 and 10. But once again, we talk of potential rather than reality at the moment. Social enterprises have played and can further play an important role in social services to people, SDGs 3 and 4. And the ILO estimates that about 75% of the population don't have adequate social protection. And this is further aggravated by the current pandemic. So once again, this is a huge role that the social enterprises are playing at the moment. Local development in disadvantaged areas is another area that can be looked at. The circular economy, recycling, environmental protection, and culture. So what we're looking at is a holistic approach. And what I'd like to argue is an ecosystem that we're talking about. And I'll come to that in a moment. In general, UN agencies and civil society organizations have recognized the importance of the SSE and innovative development approach to tackle such issues. And this includes the fighting of exclusion, inequality, and the promotion of gender equality, which is high on the agenda. And that was mentioned as well by Chantal Line. Now, as well as transition and integration. Now, when it comes to I want to move on to the actual work that the UN task force is doing. I just want to find a slide that I had in this regard that I want to refer to. Now, at the UN, we talk about the opportunity to create partnerships with actors and movements of the SSE. And this is where I think the solution lies. It's not the UN, it's not the social SSE organizations or the social enterprises and the Catalyst 2030 on their own, but it's got to be a collection of this energy that we put together. And at the task force, we're trying to do that by bringing in many of these, what we call observers to our debate, to enrich the debate and start rocking the boat a bit to show us which direction we can go into. We've got many observers, Catalyst 2030, REPES, International Cooperative Alliance, the Social Economy Europe, and many others. And when I talk about the ecosystem, we need to approach it at different levels. At the local level, the idea of the new welfare is very much rooted in multi-stakeholder and multi-level partnerships. This is at the core of the Agenda 2030 in SDG 17. And is rooted on the conviction that a dialogue with SSE sector should reinforce and not undermine the role of the public sector, but should remain, who should remain as the main sector ensuring these fundamental rights, but certainly a big role for the SSE sector to do something. Then we move to the national level, and this is the key to unlocking all of this. We've got to get governments to mainstream the thinking and the budgeting process around the social and solidarity economy. At the moment, it's an afterthought in most of the developing economies. And we need to mainstream this thinking at a national level. And this is where the Catalyst 2030 guidelines that were recently developed, that need to be disseminated to countries to show them how they can put together a regulatory framework that will support the development of social enterprises. And that is going to be, for me, the key of unlocking the way forward. And we can do programs and activities in these countries to show them how it can be done. But unless there's a regulatory framework and a mainstreaming of this in the national strategies, we're going to lose opportunity. Now, many of the task force members, such as the SSE, the ILO, the OECD, UNDP, are working in countries at the moment, but it's too uncoordinated. And we need to, with even in the UN system, to be more coordinated. At the international level, the fora and alliances are important, and I want to hit the last 2 or 3 points that I want to make. And this is where we are promoting and supporting governments who want to put together a UN resolution on the social and solidarity economy. And France, we're in discussion with the government of France at the moment to take the lead in this arena. But why is this important? It's because it's going to put it on the global agenda, as well as rolling this down to national agenda and around to the grassroots level. We've got to attack this at all the different levels. By putting it on the UN agenda, we're starting to elevate the thinking of global leaders on the importance of the social and solidarity economy, which isn't across the board at the moment. Now, the ILO is fortunate that next year at our International Labour Conference, we're going to have an item on the agenda, which is going to be dealing with the social and solidarity economy, which gives us a huge platform to have this global debate. But at the same time, we've put together a program called SSE for SDGs, which is a program where we can go into countries, hold their hand, help them develop a regulatory framework and show them how this can be done, because there's not necessarily the expertise across developing economies to deal with this. We've got a knowledge hub program that we've created, but I think I'm going to stop there and rather allow for more debate on this. I think the conclusion that I want to come to is that we need to up our game in, I think, how can the social entrepreneurs help in this debate? By agitating as you are currently doing, by showing us how it can be done, and breaking down these barriers of a very stereotypical thinking in the business and economic environments to show the value add of the social economy. And that's something that we at the UN can join hands with the social entrepreneurs to make this happen. And I think these partnerships are already starting to bear fruit. Thank you, Sue. I sound like a preacher and I can go on forever, but I'll stop here.
It was great, very inspiring, Vic. And I don't know how it's going with, I know that you've been working to try to get a resolution to the UN for the social and solidarity economy. I don't know if it's something that might be going forward this year.
Well, we've had discussions with the French government. In fact, we're in almost daily discussion with them. And in their recent launch of the Pact for Impact, where you guys were around, they've come back to us and the Minister Gregoire said that they want to lead that process and they want to put it on the agenda this year. It's a very bureaucratic process to get there. But hopefully Chantal Line's office is helping and guiding us on how to do this. It's a tall order. but we're going to have a full go at supporting the governments, because remember, it's not the UN who does this, it's the governments. And so we need to get France and the governments to support them to get this on the table.
Well, I think Catalyst 2030 members will do what we can to support you on that. I'd like now to sort of move to our discussion, and I'd just like to pick up on a couple of things that struck me that sort of link with the questions that were pre-submitted. I think there's two sort of things being raised here, it surfaced here in a way. Chantal Line, you kicked off by saying, do you think this economic system is going to actually, if we're still doing this economic system, will we be able to achieve the SDGs? And I think we think, no, we won't. And secondly, the amount of opportunity there is to create jobs and to bring people out of poverty and to provide what's needed is almost a second thing. And although they're linked, and I just, sort of first theme of our sort of panel discussion I'd like to discuss with you is really around, does the UN system know what a social entrepreneur is? And one of the reasons I want to come back to those 2 points is because I'm in this for changing the system. And that was something that was raised by Lucy Perkins, that don't think people fully understand that we're not just trying to grow we're not even trying to grow our organizations. If I wanted to do that, I wouldn't be here. We're trying to pass on what we know. And in fact, that was what we did when we worked with you on the Sustainable Development Goals, Chantal Line. We passed on freely at our own cost, our own knowledge to try to make the world better. So we want to work with governments and business and the UN to actually mainstream some of these ways we've been doing things so that we can have that better world and achieve the SDGs. So I guess that's one thing, that we're in it for system change, and I'm not sure if that's understood at the UN. And it sounds a bit threatening. A social entrepreneur that I spoke to, he says, oh, I can't say system change in my country, which was a sub-Saharan African country, because they'll think, a friend of his said, what, are you going to start a coup? You know, it sounds a bit threatening, but we need to improve the systems. And secondly, we could create a lot of jobs. So I think that's almost another thing. So I just come back to Lucy's question, you know, does the UN system know what a social entrepreneur is and how we differ from the NGOs or regular enterprises?
Do you want me to start?
Please, Chantal Line, go ahead. Yeah.
So first, the bad news, then the good news. The bad news is there's no agreed definition of social entrepreneurship at the UN. That's the bad news. The good news is, I mentioned to you what recommendation UNTAD had with a lot of input from other agencies, including Vic's ILO agencies. But these SD reports lead to a resolution. We just talked about a potential resolution on social solidarity economy. So in the resolution of last year and the one 2 years ago, despite the fact we don't have an agreed definition, the resolution, which is supported by more than 100 countries, recognize that social entrepreneurs are agents of change. So maybe instead of saying systemic change, you may call it reform or something. So be less threatening for some. And then that can address sustainable development challenges by developing effective and simple solutions to the areas of utility services, education, healthcare, hunger, eradication, and the environment, thus playing an important role in achieving the SDGs. So we don't have a definition, but we recognize their role. At least more than 100 countries do. And then in helping alleviate poverty and catalyze social transformation. So social transformation is there. Strengthening the productive capacity of vulnerable groups. So it really focused on what Vic was talking about, these vulnerable groups, including persons with disabilities, producing goods and services that are accessible to them. As they create alternative sustainable models, so that you just mentioned, it's funny, right? Of production, finance, and consumption to respond to these problems while generating value. So here's the key. There's a lot of people that think of social entrepreneurship as a not-for-profit. And we think of them as actually agent of change that actually create value while doing good. And so they're doing well by doing good. And it's the definition the closest definition, and if you look at this resolution, would be that they just don't prioritize profit making. They prioritize solving environmental and social problems while making money. And it recognized that we need to have policies in place and programs to support and social entrepreneurs, and we encourage government to set up environment conducive to social innovation, and the need to support financial literacy so they are financially sustainable, providing job and income opportunity for the disadvantaged groups. Going back to this issue, and they basically conclude by saying this is more important now with the COVID-19 than ever. And so, yeah, so that's the good and the bad side of my answer.
Thanks, Chantal. One of the ideas we've got at Catalyst 2030 is that social entrepreneurs could be inside the UN meetings, much as we did in the Rio Plus 20 SDGs process, where we were advocating for SCP, Sustainable Consumption Production, having breakfast briefings with diplomats, you know, explaining, so that they would then say, oh yeah, okay, let's do it. Do you think that it would be a good idea to have some social entrepreneurs attending UN meetings and perhaps picking up on some of these ways that you've described what we do as a sort of a language that it will be acceptable at the UN, and maybe even matchmaking issues with governments that who have particular issues they want to solve, to actually say improve their systems in their country for whatever issue it is that they're very concerned about? Do you think that's something we could run with and do? Do you think it would work?
Well, there's several angles to this, and I'm sure Vic can add, but we do have a Science and Technology Innovation Forum where we actually have a competition, and we recognize the best innovators related to the SDGs, and Unreasonable Group does that as well, and several other accelerators and group like this. The problem is we do not have some sort of a matchmaking between government's need related to their VNR, voluntary national reviews, and those bottom-up pro-poor innovation. So when people think of innovation, they keep thinking of Cambridge and Silicon Valley. They don't think of actually all this innovation is actually happening in the field. So how do we work with you? How do we help create that so that these become available? And if they're not visible, they don't get financed, so they can't get scaled. And what gets scaled instead is these perhaps less adapted technology or innovation that are important from a very different cultural environment and economic systems. So I'm going to return the question to you. In that case, how do we do that? How do we document them? How do we make them visible to our membership? Second, to your question about if you could contribute to the UN, I'd say yes. I mean, we don't have an extensive, UN, all of UN place now like we did during the SDG and the Rio Plus 20 negotiation, right? It's more decentralized to, ILO and UNCTAD and other groups, but we could probably work with you, and I'm sure Vic can do that, and I can help as well, to direct you to the group where you may have the most impact. And for instance, raising awareness with members about the power of social solidarity economy, to make sure we include it in more documents. So if we don't succeed, for instances, or it takes longer again to get a resolution on social solidarity economy, because last year we could not add, member states were told not to add the resolution because of COVID-19 and the least capacity to negotiate, then how can we include the language in the other resolution and social entrepreneurship in the other resolution that we have? And how do we ensure that their voices are heard in our Science, Technology, Innovation Forum, in our Commission on Science and Technology for Development, in our work on entrepreneurship that we do at UNTAD? We have 43 entrepreneurship centers, they're called Improtect centers in 43 different countries where we do training. How could we help each other? I just connected them with the entrepreneurship organization that is now going to provide mentorship for them. We have E-Trade for Women, which is women in each region of the world that are working in the digital space, so that young women can see somebody that actually is a woman leader in the digital space, a woman entrepreneur, so they know it's feasible. And then so they can mentor each other and have a network of them. So there's several ways to do this, but I just would think it's a little more difficult because it's a bit less decentralized. We're now gearing up for UNCTAD 15 in Barbados in October. We have a youth group that we are leading. We would love to have, if you have, everybody under 30 is a youth at the UN. So if you have some of your social entrepreneur that would like to contribute, it's more macroeconomic approaches that we do, like the role of trade for social entrepreneurs and the role of the financial system and direct foreign investments. So yeah, there are many, but we just need to pinpoint them and prioritize because you probably can't participate in all of them.
Thanks, Chantal. So we do have initiatives who've sort of described what they want to do. Some of them are, we've got a very specific solution for, say, social and emotional learning or digital training. And some of them are more systemic. So Susan Bornstein and Andrea work on last mile transport, especially in sub-Saharan Africa, with bicycles and dirt bikes to deliver healthcare, to boost the economy and make sure goods can get to market and people are empowered. And they feel it's a neglected issue across the UN. So that's a more systemic. So I think there's two different ways we can have case study. I think we called it in Catalyst sort of recipe cards of, hey, this social entrepreneur's got this model. And in fact, sort of moving on to the next, I've got three sort of general areas to talk about and then we can open up. So I've got to keep moving on. But we had a request from the Nigerian government. So it's thinking about how can social entrepreneurs cover the cost of their time to support the UN and governments who would like us to help. So the government of Nigeria are developing a program for street children, and they asked Catalyst 2030 which social entrepreneurs have solutions that they could adopt. So we sent some information and they picked out 4 that they thought were really applicable. And what they wanted us to do was to coach and mentor their on-the-ground team, first in a pilot and then in a rollout, to actually adopt and use these solutions. So it's in effect technology transfer that we're talking about to help local projects. And there was some potential for UN development programme funding, but it was only available to UN sort of usual sort of briefcase carrying consultants and not available to 4 different social enterprises. So I wonder if you've, I mean, I guess maybe Vic, if you've, in terms of this is about work and paying for work, or Chantal Line, whoever has an answer to this, how do you think we can cover the cost of our time to do this technology transfer?
As you were talking, at the task force level, we've got a number of UN agencies that are members of the task force. So there is a good coordinated platform there. Now, for initiatives that go into the field at country level, we've all got a footprint out there. And within the ILO, we've got a footprint that covers all the African countries, Asian, Latin America, and so do many of the UN agencies. And then we have what's called the resident coordinator that coordinates the activities there. But what we could do, because at the task force, we have identified education as one area we need to spend time on. Another area has been the local economic development. And then we're going to talk about the youth. How do we bring the youth behind this? Because there's a lot of energy there that we need to tap into. And now you've touched on an area that I think could be another one that we could look at in the UN task force is, can we create a platform for the social entrepreneurs who have got these ideas, but who are battling to find the support, whether it be financial or otherwise, to implement them, and that we can use our networks within the UN system to partner with the social enterprises to go and deliver this in the field. I think that's a huge space that we can look at and come up with an effective mechanism, because we work with many donors out there. Some of them have got an appetite for this, some of them don't. But we do know the networks out there, and even within the governments, which can also finance some of this themselves. But what we can do is maybe bring another partner that would help finance some of the stuff you're talking about. So I think that would be an exciting area to talk about, and I'm willing to take that up with the task force team from Catalyst 2030, who's on the seat of, or as an observer on the task force. So yes, there's opportunities, but one has to sit down and take it case by case and see which area you're talking about, who are the donors that work in those areas, and then we start looking at getting a program together. And if we can get one successful one, that could breed to further success. And I think that'll be a good rollout process.
That's fantastic, Vic. I love how sort of you just get on with things, sort it out here and now. We'll definitely follow up on that with you. I've got a sort of final question here from Susan Bornstein, who picks up on this point that social entrepreneurs always work in partnerships, and they tend to always co-create solutions with a wider range of stakeholders. And that's really a key factor in getting good outcomes. Some of our group, like David Parejo, has had a fantastic experience working with UN Climate Neutral Now. But for others, you know, it's a bit of an uphill struggle. And so Susan actually asked, can you see opportunities for social entrepreneurs to co-design solutions for programs or projects at the UN, rather than just the sort of RF request for proposals coming out, which are already sort of finished off? We'd like to work with you a bit more to design things, which is just the sort of approach you were suggesting there, Vic. Chantal Line, do you have any?
It could go beyond that as well, because you're looking at, for example, the ILO. We've got a unit that falls under my management, which is called cooperatives, which really is the social and solidarity economy unit. Now, I certainly don't think it would be a challenge, rather than us trying to deal with it as the ILO, that we invite the people you're talking about to come with us and co-design something from scratch, because we do have seed money within the ILO that we could allocate to these programs, because we work on a biannual financial management process. And we can, if we can build that in, I think it would be very conducive to being more creative within the UN, opening up certain boundaries and thinking. And if we can do that at the development stage, and our guys are involved in that together with you, it's much easier to go and sell it out there when we want to look at implementation. So, you know, the two angles, the one is at the task force level, but within the agencies of the UN, there's a lot of opportunities that we can also open up. We've got UNRWA, we've got the UNDP, we've got all the different players in the task force that we can see who's open to this. But I can tell you now at the ILO, because I can speak on the behalf of the ILO, we certainly would be open to co-creating and to create a platform where we can talk. We've just created what we call an innovation hub, innovation facility in the enterprise as part of the ILO. And this will be a perfect platform to invite you in to co-create with us. And then we look at the design and the rollout together with the UN, and using our competencies together with your ideas and competencies. And the creativity that you bring is what we don't have. I mean, I'll be honest about that. The energy and the creativity that you're talking about from social entrepreneurs is what we need. You bring a different energy into the space, and that's what we like.
Well, you're pretty creative there, Vic, I think, yourself. That's fantastic. We'll definitely pick up on this straight away. Chantal Line, do you have any sort of reflections on other ideas on opportunities for social entrepreneurs to co-design programs?
No, I do agree with what Vic said, that you know, the more diversity in the co-creation, the better the project, and that is needed. And oftentimes at the UN, we need that maybe when we sit in our ivory towers. But the way UNTAD works is we do not have country offices. So we basically get requests. We do environmental policy reviews. So we get a request from the labor or the finance or the trade ministry to come and do an entrepreneurship policy review, a science, technology, innovation policy review, competitiveness, trade, investment. So that's the way we operate, right? Or they request us to install and then protect center in there, and then we transfer the knowledge and the training. We do the training. So for us to include and co-create, it would be in these policy, it would be at the policy level, so that you could, but it would have to be those that are at the country level. So say we're doing Nigeria, and you have social enterprise in Nigeria, we make sure they're at the table, right? At the same time, if you have good practices, then they could be feeding into our entrepreneurship policy report. So we would have to, you know, you send those to me, and then we include them. Yeah, so that's kind of the way. And then the other way would be, we'd need to find a way to connect with our, as I mentioned, now in our UN country team, we have economists and we have partnership people. That's their job. And so, you know, connecting those people on the ground to our partnership people in these countries. And some of them may be easy for you to do. Some of them you may need a little bit of help in handling from some of us at the UN that know better the system. But I think that would be the direct link at the country level is now possible and probably the optimal one.
That's fantastic. So we have some well-described initiatives at the moment that we can share with both Vic and you, Chantal Line. We're just thinking, we're going to let the audience come in with any questions. I don't know, I see Valeria who works on sustainable tourism, has made some comments there. Valeria, do you have any question for Vic or Chantal Line?
I can just say something very quickly because I must jump to another session. I was just writing now how inspiring this conversation is because I'm one of the members of the Working Group 6 in one of the initiatives that Sue was speaking about. And we are trying to put together multi-stakeholder, multi-level collaborative to transform tourism at the root. I really wanted to find those solutions globally and bring them to people who can ensure the uptake by making them law or spreading the models and so on. At times it feels like a daunting task, but when I hear people like you, I'm like, oh, it's feasible. We just have to find the right people. So it just gives me so much energy. And so thank you very much for that. And I can assure you that we'll follow up. So thank you so much.
Yes, thank you, Valeria. So Valeria's initiative is described in, I can send you, they're really easy to look at. They're just PowerPoint slides with nice pictures. And then you can, maybe, could you signpost us to the right people? Or it's a bit of work for you, but it could reap some big rewards. Signpost us to the right people in the UN to talk to, or include it, as you say, in your good practices, Chantal Line.
Look, from my side, it's you've got my email address, and you send me an email address, you will get an answer and a response, and linking you to people depending on what you're talking about. We'll try and channel this in the right way. I think it would be great to start that discussion. It's arduous because it can be many things, but I think this is an area that's exciting and needs to have attention paid to it. You know, it's a hard sell. I'm working with the government out there to develop a social and solidarity economy policy at a national level. And it's taken us forever to explain to them that we need to go to a broader definition and to include social enterprises that can make profit. You know, they wanted to exclude that completely from the debate. And so it's a different debate in different countries, and the level of understanding is not there. But working with creative people and creative ideas is going to help further this initiative and cause.
That's fantastic. I think, I guess I'd just like to sort of come back to you with that sort of, come back to you to the panel with this sort of final question of, you know, do you have any sort of summing up points or reflections in terms of how can social entrepreneurs help the UN to achieve the SDGs? Do you have any, as you reflect on this, do you have any sort of parting thoughts on that?
Well, I'd say go back to your alumni and make them understand that they did not prepare you to be a social entrepreneur, that the classes, we need to pressure them to change the curriculum. One of the slowest moving institution after the UN probably is our higher education institution. So we put the pressure on them. We need to change that. So that's on the advocacy side, and help them find out what is it they need to teach, right? And then that's, as Vic said, I mean, I may not respond in the day because I'm very busy, so I can't respond to many emails. But if you have specific requests that are well written, that can just forward to somebody in the system, because sometimes it's just like not a, you know, it's so hard to know. We don't have a directory like a business at the UN where you can say, oh, Vic is the one to call for on enterprise at ILO and Chantal Line on, you know, it doesn't exist. So you almost need somebody. That's the sad thing, but I think it's changing slowly. And And the other thing is, you know, we need pressure on our leaders now as they are printing and helicoptering in these trillions of dollars. On the one hand, that money get targeted to MSMEs, social entrepreneurs, and why. And so, and if you have any case studies of number of jobs, GDP growth, community development, rural development that were created by any one of your initiatives, share those with us. We'll find a way to include it either on our social solidarity economy work, on our UN economics network, where, you know, share that with us so we can document and change mind. But also, the third thing is, developing countries do not have the fiscal capacity to print this trillion. And so we need to have solidarities and access to vaccine, but also in ODA. We have a lot of UK people here. UK reduced its ODA, official development aid, when we need more money and more help to developing countries than ever. And I'm just pointing the UK now, but a lot of countries are actually giving loan instead of grant now. We need to change that. So sorry, it's broader, but
that's okay, it's good. Vic, do you have any parting thoughts here?
Look, as I mentioned before, I think that the Catalyst 2030 has brought together people who are creative, who've got energy, and you've got to push the boundaries. You know, you've got the license to do it. Within the UN, we're working within a bureaucratic system of rules which need to be there for a very good reason. And the boundaries that we have are far more restricting than what you've got. And so you've got to use that license and the creativity that you've got to push those boundaries and to drag us along with you so that we can open up the doors where necessary to allow for that scaling up. But most of all, we need to get the youth on board. You know, when I noticed someone, you know, on the chat line here is doing their doctorate and studying. I don't know whether he classifies as youth or not. I haven't gone into, is it John Paul that's there? You still look youthful, John Paul. I see you on the screen now. But when we're talking about the youth, we need to get them on board because they're crying out for a value system that the SSE offers. They've got the energy, and like the Greta Grunbergs of the, you know, went on the environmental stage. We need that energy to go into a far more bigger sweeping wave that can go across the global debate. And I think that's what Catalyst 2030 has been able to get right, but has got the potential to drive much further. And I would say carry on doing that, and don't take no for an answer. You know, we've got to move, and we're behind it. But remember, the UN system is like a big tanker out there. When we start turning the wheel today, we might turn in about 3 years in the direction that everyone wants to go. It's a slow process, but the more we can get creative ideas and activities and energy, I think we can make this work together.
Thank you. That's a fantastic rallying call from both of you, actually. Thank you. So I'm going to fail to sum up very well because I've got a lot of notes here. But I think some of the key things that were mentioned were the language that we use. You mentioned, Chantal Line, in some of the resolutions, the language that we use to talk about what we do so that it lands well. And that was something I definitely learned in working with the UN. You've got to use the right language. You want case studies, good practices, facts and figures from us that you can then put into your reports and use. If we come to you with some concrete, direct, specific requests, you will see if you can help us perhaps with some of those 20 initiatives I mentioned.
And vice versa, Sue, if you have a list by topic, by SDGs of entrepreneur in each sector, you send that to Vic and I. Oftentimes we're looking for speakers, we're looking for, so if we have that handy, it's easy to say, hey, put that on the list. We don't guarantee to get chosen because oftentimes it's higher than our pay grade, but we can always put them out there.
Okay, that's good. And it's good this is being recorded, everybody, and we'll share it with you afterwards. So we can go back and make sure we capture all of this. And we'll send out the recommendations as well. And Vic, you talked about this idea of a platform that we'll pick up with you to see if we can accelerate progress with some of those social entrepreneurs who really want to mainstream in another country. That there might be a way we can do this with. And I think a final sort of recommendation is that I heard from you was you're in the UN, it is a bit bureaucratic, we're a bit freer, and if we keep at this with energy, then that can actually make things happen. And we definitely feel that you're there on our side, supporting us from within. So you're social entrepreneurs in the system, which is brilliant. Thank you. So thank you, everybody. And thanks so much to our wonderful speakers. You've really made such a great contribution and everybody's enthused. So we'll definitely be in touch again really soon. Thank you.
Thank you, Sue. Thank you, everyone. Keep the good
Thank you
work.
so much.
We can get there together.
Thank you. That was brilliant. Thank you.
All right.
Bye, everyone.
Everyone, stay safe.